Okay, so today, my name is Vance Lucas. Today I'm going to talk to you about the importance of side projects and why you need one. So who am I? You probably might know me best with Techlahoma. You might have seen me at a bunch of other Techlahoma events. I co-founded Techlahoma and Thunder Plains. So it's probably where you're going to know me best. That's what I'm doing today. I started on the web when I was 14 years old, making websites, other kinds of stuff like that, just really into computers. I was fortunate to have access to a computer and internet that young, so I took full advantage of that. Built and sold many websites and apps. You'll hear about some of those today. I have experience all over the stack, front end, back end, APIs, mobile, desktop apps even, all APIs, all that kind of stuff. I have no formal training in computer science or programming at all. I'm completely self-taught. Started out super young, just Googling. Well, not even Googling. I was on like Alta Vista and Lycos before Google was a thing. I say Googling. That's such a weird. It's a verb in my head now. What else? So I ran consultancy, Brightbit. And I've worked a ton of other tech jobs. Now I'm the principal software engineer and JavaScript team lead at NetSuite and Oracle. You can find me on Twitter and Slack at vlucas. So if you want to ping me on the Techlahoma Slack, I'm at vlucas or vancelucas.com on the web. So this is, I wanted to come up with kind of a list of all the things side projects can do for you. And this is kind of the short list that I made. I'm sure there's a lot of others that I missed here, but these are kind of the ones that I wanted to highlight. They can keep you motivated. They can, be fun and allow you to have fun, be creative. I think side projects are really an important part of your own personal career development. This is especially true when you're new and still learning. They kind of they give you a way to explore new technologies and learn new things that might not be part of your normal job or part of your normal day-to-day. So a lot of times, it's basically taking career development into your own hands, really, is what it is. You're not going to get everything you need from your job. You're not going to necessarily get to do new or cool stuff for your job. So that's kind of up to you to do yourself for your own personal career development. And I think a big key too, especially when you're learning, is motivation. So if you pick a good side project, it can really be a key to keeping you motivated and maintaining that motivation all the way through your project. It can also eventually get you a job, make you money, you can turn it into a business, all those kinds of other things too. I'm not going to focus on that as much, but we'll get to that. So when you're starting out, there's a lot to learn. This is really more if you're new. Like, it can look like you're staring at, like, I want to get way over there, but how do I get there? I'm going to argue that side projects or starting a side project is probably the best way to get there. And that is because you're going to have to learn. It's really about hands-on learning versus reading learning, which I think most people learn much, much better and much quicker hands-on. So programming is hard. There's a lot to learn. That's what that mountain was all about. So this is a side project, really, as far as when I say motivation is key. Side project really is about making sure you won't quit when it gets hard, because it's going to get hard. If you're trying to do anything non-trivial, there's a mountain of stuff you have to learn. You have to learn what is HTTP, what is a database, what's a server-side language, what's a client-side, all this kind of stuff. So it's kind of easy to do. Well, I won't say easy. It's a much easier to do a static, HTML, CSS site. But the first time you try to do anything non-trivial, you really want something that's going to keep you motivated through that really hard work. So picking a side project, these are kinds of things that you want to look for when picking your side project. You want to pick something you're interested in. So it has to be something that you personally are interested in and excited about. That's really the most important criteria. Nothing else matters a whole lot. It doesn't have to be tech related even. You can pick, if you like horses, you can make a website about horses. Like, it doesn't matter. We had a speaker at Thunder Plains making From Seed to Spoon. He makes an app about gardening, completely offline thing, but he's making resources and information on that offline thing. So just something you're passionate about, something you really like. And the reason is, again, motivation. So ideally, if you start any kind of website or project, you're probably going to have it or be working on it for several years. And so you really want to pick something you like, because you're going to be staring at it a lot, dealing with questions, other kinds of things like that. And then you can build a simple app or website about it. This can be really simple. It can be start as just a static site, informational. There's even GitHub repos. People have started just a list of information. So there was a GitHub repo going around last week, or this Sunday. Yeah, I guess it is last week. That just listed all the companies that had startup discounts, and it was like all over, social media, Reddit, Hacker News, and that's all this guy did. He's just listed links to companies that provided discounts to startups, and it blew up. So it can be super, super simple list of helpful info. Doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to make money, at least not right away. That probably shouldn't be your goal if you're learning. That might be your goal with a side project if you're, if you're looking for a way out of a job or something like that. So to start this off, I'm going to share my story and really how a single side project kind of shaped my whole entire career. And this is, I don't think I've ever really shared this story, so a lot of you that know me might not even know anything about this, but I'm sharing my story because, and it's a part of this presentation because I think it adds context with concrete examples for you to hear exactly why I think side projects are so important and the kind of impact they can have in your journey. So I'm going to share some of what I've done, some successes, some failures, things I've learned along the way, and some key takeaways for everyone. So my story starts out with a video game called Starcraft. So this game was released in 1998 by Blizzard. They're now owned by Activision. But it was Blizzard Entertainment back then. It came out. It was a really popular game of the year. I kind of got into it. I was 98. I was 13. Would be turning 14 that year. So. Anyway, this game comes out. I get into the game. I get into custom map making. This game was released with a tool called StarEdit, which had a trigger system, which is very much like programming. And it basically, and the trigger screen is on the far right here. It's basically lets you set conditions. If you bring a unit into this area, trigger this action. If this player harvests this many resources, do this thing, like it's very much if-then, logically oriented, kind of got me actively building things that way. I built like RPG maps and all kinds of cool stuff. But it really kind of got me into programming. So Starcraft made me a programmer. And it's kind of weird how a game can do that, but I wanted to build a fan site. So the landscape of the web back then was anytime something new came out, you basically had the company like source of information, and you had not a lot of other stuff. There weren't a whole lot of fan sites. There weren't a whole lot of websites built around this stuff. There wasn't social media where people could easily share their opinions and things like that. It was very, very new. So I looked around and I said, I want some more information on Starcraft. I don't find any. Maybe I should make some, because I was really into the game. Me and a buddy were, and so I was like, okay, maybe I should make some. So I made a website. So I started out with something called Aol Home Site, which everyone was on AOL at the time, dial-up kind of stuff. And Hometown, sorry. Hometown basically let you build a single page. So I started building a single page, and I reached the limits of that. I moved to GeoCities. Does anyone know what GeoCities is? Okay, cool. That's really where a lot of the early web kind of exploded when you have GeoCities, because it enabled you to do pretty much anything you wanted, build your website any way you wanted, where very few other things actually let you do that without going through the whole process of getting hosting and a domain and all that stuff. So I launched my HTML static site on GeoCities when I was 14, at end of 1998. And the things I learned creating that site basically launched my whole programming career. So I'm going to go through some of that now. There's going to be some little detours for little trips down memory lane, so if you'll bear with me, this is what Aol Home Site looked like at the time. You can laugh, it's okay. It sucks. But basically, it let you, the intent of this wasn't really to make a website, it was to make a single page about something that you could share with other people on AOL via AOL Instant Messenger or one of the chat boards they had. It was ultimately too restrictive. As I learned more about code, I wanted to change the underlying code. I wanted to make my own layout. I wanted to do things that it just would not let me do. So I kind of grew out of it. I went to GeoCities. This is what the back end of GeoCities looked like. Everything you click is a form post or a form load. There's no Ajax, awesome. There's no single page app sites at this point. This is basically a file manager. So if you think of opening a directory and getting a listing of what's in it, and that's really what GeoCities was. It had this file manager. But that meant that you could do anything you wanted. And one thing that's really funny, if you look in the bottom left, you see available space, 15 megabytes. So GeoCities is actually pretty generous at the time. 15 whole megabytes of website was pretty awesome back then. I don't think they even allowed FTP at this point, so you had to use this web-based file manager. You had to upload files with this form. You could upload up to 20 files at a time, but the catch was if your internet connection was not fast enough to upload everything in a certain amount of time, I forget what the timeout was, it was a couple minutes, it would time out and then you'd have to start over with pick all those 20 files, or then you'd have to okay, 20 didn't work, let's try 15 or let's try 10 or whatever. Sometimes you'd waste more time doing that than just uploading 5 at a time. But that's what it was. So when I moved my site over to GeoCities, I had to upload everything, huge pain, all the images and stuff I added, all the cool, animated GIFs I put on my site, because that's what people did back then. Some of the tools I used, just for nostalgia reasons. So this is a code editor called Arachnophilia, which is opposite of arachnophobia. It actually means spider love. I don't know why it was named that, but it was one of the best editors at the time that was free, because I was a teenager who didn't have a credit card. So I used that. I used Qt FTP to upload my stuff. I had a trial version that you could change the clock on your computer every time you needed to use it. It lasted 30 days, but if you remembered when you installed it, you could change the clock on your computer back, and then you could use it anytime you wanted. So that was fun. Jask Paint Shop Pro, and then Jask also had an animation shop for GIFs that was really kind of the best GIF editor at the time. I also used FileZilla, Winamp. This is Napster days, that kind of stuff. So there's no version control back here. All the version control systems like CVS, I think CVS existed, but it wasn't really used because by most people, I would say. Because it required a central server to use, CVS and SVN Subversion both use a central server, unlike Git, which is distributed. If you're using Git, you can have the whole version control in your own directory and then sync it up with the server. These models were different, so that you had to pretty much pay right off the bat. And again, as a 14, 15-year-old kid doing this, that wasn't something I could do. So I ended up with file names like index1.html, index-old.html, and just terrible stuff. So okay, so this is kind of my journey down the rabbit hole. I'm going to show you some screenshots of everything that I built. That's kind of the nostalgia detours. We're kind of back on track now. The first thing I did was that static site on GeoCities was really the first meaningful Starcraft site that I made that got some traffic and some attention. I went to, has anyone ever heard of server-side includes? Or does anyone know what those are? Okay. So Apache had this feature where you could make a comment tag, like an HTML comment, that would have a path to another file, and it would include the file on the server side before it was rendered on the, to the client. So it was really the first time, if you're going from static HTML to like wanting to have a more advanced layout, a more advanced website where you wanted a header and a footer and didn't want to have to repeat that HTML on every HTML file that you made, that was really the first time that you could like split that out without going to a full server-side programming language. The dominant languages at the time were CGI, Perl, and PHP really came on the scene, and kind of, it was so much easier than Perl. It was really easy to get into. So that's the route I went. I went PHP, mainly just for includes and some dynamic things like rendering the page title dynamically and stuff like that. And then I eventually got to full custom PHP and went all the way down the rabbit hole. That's really where I learned programming. Was my first language, PHP, besides like JavaScript on the front end, but my first server-side real language. I'm the Starcraft website. So a popular thing on the website that I did was I added files. It was kind of hard to search for things. There wasn't a whole lot of websites, so I listed files that people might search for, utilities, map editing things. People were running Battle.net bots that would handle chats for them when they were offline and kind of stuff like that. So I offered a bunch of downloads on my website. Those pages ended up getting the most traffic. So once I learned PHP, added a database, I started adding like file searches, keeping track of downloads and all that kind of stuff. And that section of the site really was the most popular section. It became kind of the bread and butter of the site. So added an admin panel. After the site, I then began freelancing, taking money over PayPal, stuff like that, all through the rest of high school and college. And then I got an internship in college at a place called Element Fusion, which NetSuite bought, and now Oracle bought NetSuite. So I actually interned. I actually interned for the company I'm now working for 10 years later. So never burn bridges. Never, ever, ever burn bridges. That was weird how that worked out. That's another story that's not in here, but a little side note. And then, my whole tech career launched after that. So those skills I learned building that site kind of really did very meaningfully impact my life. These are some of the screenshots of the websites. There's a lot here. I'll step through it. So the first on the top left that's kind of buried behind there, I called it Zari's Starcraft site. We always end up with these screen names that we pick when we're like 13 years old, and then we have them for life. Mine is Zari's. Don't ask me why I picked it. I just did. I typed it into a game one day with my buddy that I was playing, and it stuck, and that's what I was for the rest of the whole time I made this site. So it started off as that. That was the static HTML site. Once I figured out the downloads were going to be my focus, files were going to be my focus, I renamed the site to Starcraft Index, and I launched it in the year 2000. These are, there's actually more layouts than this. I couldn't find them all. I switched layouts probably every year just because I couldn't stop tweaking and learning and doing stuff. All these are table-based layouts, by the way. So these images are all like 9-sliced and like put in tables, just horrible markup, probably by today's standards. But anyway, I've got, I guess you can see the download totals on the headers of the middle top and bottom left screenshot. So anyway, let's see. So I want to stop here a little bit to talk about specifically on a side project. So when I started this Starcraft fan site, I didn't really intend for anything like this to happen. I kind of just launched it. It got, well, at the time you had to submit it to like Yahoo Demos directory, which is completely defunct now. Probably don't even know what I'm saying, but it was like this categorized directory of sites that you could submit your site to, and then it was listed by editors. So I submitted it, got some traffic off of that. Then search engines, when they started getting popular, Google came out, 98, 99-ish. I think really, really popular in 99, 2000-ish. Started indexing the site. People started finding it from keywords like Starcraft files, Starcraft downloads, Starcraft utilities, all those kinds of things. Back when Google actually told you the keywords it was sending people to your site for. They don't do that now for some reason. But, and so this kind of forced me down the rabbit hole. I always wanted to do more. Like I would get emails from people. I had my email on the contact. I would get emails from random people saying, hey, do you know how to find this file? Like your site's all I found. I didn't find this file. And then I would, get home from school and like try and go find that file and put it on my site, because I'm like, why not? If I can't find it anywhere, why not come to my site and find it? And then this kind of forced me to learn about server-side programming and databases, because at some point maintaining tons of lists of files in static HTML just doesn't scale. And then I'm like, and I'm feeling this, I'm updating the site, I'm uploading new versions of the files, I'm updating the HTML files. There's some things that are out of sync on the site, and I'm like, really what can do better? So I started looking in forums, and I remember the first time I was ever searching for how to make like a searchable downloads database. I found this thing called HTML forms, and I'd never built an HTML form before. And so I stuck the form on my page, and I'm like, why isn't this working? I didn't realize it had to, hit a backend. There had to be something on the server to like process that, right? So kind of fumbling my way through all this, I discovered. I almost started with Perl, but it was so hard to deploy on shared hosting back then. You had to commod files. You had to give files the proper permissions to like even run and execute. And it was just really error prone. So I picked up PHP. This is around the time where PHP 3 was brand new. PHP 3, PHP 4 didn't come out, I don't know when. I'm going to get the timeline wrong if I say it, but it was like PHP 3 was a big thing. Everyone was talking about what's going to be upcoming in PHP 4. So I started in PHP, learned about data. Of course, the minute you start looking at PHP, you also find MySQL, because everyone does the two together, and shared hosting all at the time supported that stack, and we're advertising LAMP stack stuff. So LAMP stack is Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP. So I got a database, and I was like, okay, well, if I put all the files in the database, I can make them searchable. Once the files were in the database, then all the listings on the site had to be database driven, because it was, just I just had to write a bunch of code. So and again, the point was, I didn't really set out to do this. It just kind of like happened that way because I wanted to make my life easier maintaining the site. The site started to get more and more popular. I got people emailing me like wanting to help on the site. I didn't have a way for them to help, so I ended up building an administration panel in PHP so they could and staff and users and accounts and stuff, so they could actually post news or do whatever. I started, since the files were already in a database, I started counting downloads and tracking bandwidth used, because I could, because it was in a database, why not? And so on the right side, you see top files, or there's top lists. So on the one with the three blue colors up at the top right, and you see database status, I'm tracking downloads of data files per category and stuff at this point. And I'm really just geeking out over all this stuff. I can track all this stuff. I can do it all. Why not? Really, down the rabbit hole really is the way. I was just focused on learning all I could about that. So we even did visitor stat tracking too at some point, kind of implemented our own. Google Analytics was not a thing, so could not really do that, use that yet. It was Urchin Analytics. It was all server side and recorded in like Perl scripts and stuff. So that started getting popular. The site started getting popular. I expanded it. I created the Zar's Network, which was like a gaming network. There were a bunch of other gaming sites starting to pop up, 2,000 plus. So I created one of my own. We had a Warcraft index, a Diablo index, some other sites as well, and it just really grew. We were considering some others as well. Let's see. So has anyone heard the saying that you should, I think the 37 Signals guys, or David Hannemeyer Hansen's basically says he extracted Rails out of Basecamp, the initial version of Basecamp, like using your own byproducts, basically, or selling your own byproducts. And so at this point, I had built administration panels. I had had this need for letting staff post some news. So I made this news program called Zar News. This was at the time where you could go to script sites. You could download a script and like install it on your, shared web host. And so Zar News was that. And then I used my own news program to power news on Starcraft index and Warcraft and Diablo indexes as well. And so I was kind of using my own dog food. This news script in particular became very popular as well. And so again, it's not something like I didn't set out to necessarily, build this. No one could have predicted this, outcome. But I built it for myself to make the administrations of my own sites easier because I had started them as, a side project just kind of grew from there. So, again, super into programming, super into databases, all that kind of stuff. Built this administration thing. So Zar News itself becomes really popular. And then I made a little bit of money on it, selling. I basically asked for donations. I didn't even sell it. It was always free, but I made a little bit of money, a couple $100 or so. Nothing really. I should have probably sold it like as a script. Charging for things was pretty hard back then. Basically everyone used PayPal, and you could make it work with. I think PayPal. They may have had the IPN, the payment notification thing where it would like ping a URL when you got a purchase, but then you had to handle everything from there. But it was still pretty hard. There wasn't anything like Stripe that like there is today. Taking payments today comparatively is super, super easy. So I ended up just mainly giving it away for free and asking for donations through PayPal. I had the goal eventually of I was starting to shift my focus away from gaming as much. This is kind of when I went to college in 2003. I hadn't played Starcraft in a while. It came out in '98, so at that point it was a 5-year-old game. So my attention was focused on going deeper into programming. Where was I going with that? With the eventual goal to build a company on distributed scripts. So I'm like, I see this opportunity. Zar News is popular. Why don't I build other scripts like an event calendar, a poll system, or whatever that people can just include on their site? Some of these things existed, but a lot of them were things that would take over your whole site. So they had these packaged systems that would site in a box. You get a poll and news and events and whatever. But I'm like, what if people don't want that? What if they just want to include it, where they want it, not have it take over their whole site? So that was the idea behind this. Zar News really took off because it was includable. So I don't know if you see these screenshots, the Diablo screenshot down there on the bottom, that news section there, this bottom right, again, this news section. This was just including the news that was generated with Zar News. So you didn't see anything of Zar News. It didn't control your site, but you could just include this one PHP file, and it would do everything for you. That was kind of the selling point. So anyway, that's kind of the direction I was going, but it ultimately didn't do that. The landscape kind of shifted. As the web goes, there was a lot of changes. I ended up selling Starcraft Index in 2005 while I was in college. I needed the money to build a new computer and do some other stuff while I was in college, and I hadn't played the game at that point for many years. The site was stagnating. I was still getting some hits, but it wasn't like fresh anymore to people. So I sold that site, shut the other ones down, and all that kind of stuff. So let's relate it back. Okay, so some mistakes I made along the way. There's some good mistakes, some bad mistakes, and then there's some ugly mistakes. So this was, I thought these layouts were cool at the time. So obviously didn't understand color theory, contrasts, color palettes, didn't understand legible text. So that's a fun one. This mistake I made, so this is when the Starcraft site was database driven. I had all my download counts in columns as tinyint, 3 are assigned, which if you know, so tinyint is a tiny integer, 3 is the length, so it can hold 3 characters, and signed means it holds a place for the signature. It holds like a bit for the signature, plus or minus. And so these download counts, I don't know if you can see that, but that's basically 2 of those download counts are stopped at 127. So I had this problem, like all these download counts stop at 127. Why is nobody downloading the files anymore? Like I don't know what's going on. And of course, that's actually the maximum value that a signed tinyint column can store. So it just wasn't incrementing anymore. And so I figured that out. A signed or an unsigned tinyint column can store 256, up to 256, but I changed them to big ints so they won't ever have a cap on them anymore. I don't know, some weird thing I found out. So I had some performance issues on the site when it was getting popular. What's the date on that? 2002, I think. The site went down for a period of time. So there was these top sites that had these JavaScript things you can include, so people would like vote for your site on this top site thing. One of those top sites went offline, and then it broke my whole site because I was loading the script synchronously, and it hits that script, it doesn't load, it keeps waiting for it to load, and then nothing else loads on my site. And I couldn't figure it out for like a month. If you look at the dates, I didn't figure it out for a long time. Eventually, someone like emailed and was like, hey, this thing is happening to your site. You should probably fix that. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's what it is. I should totally fix that. So I like did some, I don't know. It was kind of a stupid problem to have. But you know, back then browsers didn't have all of the dev tools and stuff that they have now. So if it was now, I would have popped open dev tools. I would have seen it in the network tab. You know, that just didn't exist back then. So you kind of had to feel your way through everything. On the right side, this database status, this was doing so many queries that it would time out on the page on the crappy small shared hosts I was trying to run this on. This was like doing queries in loops. I was hitting the n+1 problem. Didn't have any indexes on these columns. I was doing all kinds of bad performant things you do when you have really bad performance. I was doing them all. This is probably the worst one. So Zarnews got really popular, and it actually, under a certain configuration of PHP, it introduced a critical security vulnerability into people's websites that used Zarnews. And that was maybe the king of them all, like full remote script execution. So basically, if you use Zarnews and you had PHP configured a certain way, people could take advantage of that to like get access to your whole site or server even. So pretty severe security vulnerability. What it was, the highlighted text If you had register globals and allow URL fopen on in PHP, which were terrible, terrible things, then you could take advantage of this vulnerability. So the way that Zarnews worked, it was includable. You could include this PHP script on your site. The way that I did this was I first defined a variable that defined the path to your Zarnews installation, and then you included this file. Well, this file that you included also used that variable to include other files like the database connection and things like that. So PHP had this really, really, really terrible quote feature called register globals, that anything you put in the query string would be assigned that same variable locally in the script automatically for you. Like a really super helpful feature, right? So the problem was if you included this tpath equals in the query string, it would actually set that tpath variable in that file. And if you included that news.php file directly with the tpath, and your PHP configuration was set that way, which actually a lot of hosts were set that way at the time. PHP has since removed register globals and wishes to forget its terrible past. It's not even an option anymore. And then allow URL fopen. In PHP, if you did a require or an include with a URL, it would actually include that from a remote site, and then eval that code and execute it locally. So those two together, along with the specific way I wrote my script to allow you to include news anywhere, led to this terrible vulnerability. So you might not make a mistake as big as that. Sites, things really aren't included like that anymore. If I were to do this today, it'd probably be like a JavaScript that you'd put on your page, loaded asynchronously or something. So anyway, so I figured it out eventually, though. Learned a ton along the way, obviously, through a ton of mistakes. That's kind of the way you learn. This is Starcraft Index in 2004. We hit 1 million downloads overall in 2004. We were getting 2,000 to 3,000 hits a day. We were getting over 250,000 visitors a month, probably 250,000 to 500,000 visits a month. We broke a terabyte of bandwidth in May 2005. Very, very popular site. We fixed the download script. We finally figured out those pesky performance issues. So that's why you see all the stats here. And this is kind of when we, I wouldn't say we figured everything out, but we had figured out through our mistakes and our growth because of this project and the popularity it received, kind of forced us to fumble through all this stuff until we figured it out. So I present all that just as an example of how a side project can kind of take you all the way through. And this is, even if you don't have success with your side project, you're still going to learn a lot, and you're still going to shape your own skill set. So whatever you pick, it was kind of fortunate that the site got popular and started getting attention. I kind of had to pay attention to it because of that, and that's kind of, I wouldn't say I was forced to do all this. I could have just shut it down and walked away, but I was learning, I was having fun. I was genuinely interested in Starcraft, so I maintained my motivation through that, maintained the fun through that. I liked the community that was built around it. The people I met, you might meet people. That's one thing I left off the initial list. I actually met some people that I still chat with today and email today through this, through the site. So that's fun. So what are some other reasons you might want to start a side project? Scratching your own itch is a main one. This is another site I built. I built this. It was called jscompress.com. I put it up in 2008. Yeah, 2008 was the first version. Initially, it was just a fat box that you pasted JavaScript code in and then click compress, and you got an output result that's like the compressed JavaScript. This might seem like something no one needs because Webpack does this, Parcel does this, there's tons of things that do this locally. Does anyone use like Webpack or bundler, JavaScript bundler, right? They do this, right? So why would you need a site for this? That seems stupid, right? Turns out a lot of people don't like the command line, or are doing a project on a computer where they don't have access to the command line, or some situation like that where they're maybe not on their own computer, they don't have it configured, they just want a quick online utility. So I built this site in 2008, launched it. It was really just for myself and my coworkers to use. I had some coworkers that were working on stuff that weren't programmers that wanted to minify their JavaScript, so I threw this up in a couple hours, really. I used open source. I used like known minification tools. There's an algorithm called JSMin, and there was another algorithm called Packer, JS Packer, and then Uglify JS came on later, which is Uglify now is what's used by most JavaScript bundle systems today. Let's see. I maintained the site for several years without doing anything to it or putting any ads on it. And then after, about 2010, 11 or so, I put Google AdWords on it. And it started making some pretty serious money because it was starting to make some serious traffic. I was number one on the first page of Google for compressed JavaScript and minified JavaScript. It still is either number one or in the top 3 today for those terms. I made anywhere from $150 to $500 a month on Google AdSense on this, basically hands off. It's a super simple site. It was almost fully passive income, but again, I didn't intend to make money off this. Like this is kind of a happy accident. I noticed that because of the domain name choice and the keywords in the domain and the keywords on the site, it was very SEO friendly, got indexed very highly, got picked up on some people put together like lists of top 10 sites to minify JavaScript, and I was like up there. So I got a ton of quality backlinks from a ton of really good quality sites. And I was getting over 3,000 hits a day at its peak. And once I noticed the traffic it was getting, that's when I put the ads on it. So I ended up selling it in 2016. I was getting declining ad revenues because of the rise of ad blockers. Just a couple of years ago, uBlock, AdBlock Plus. The target market was developers, and developers are probably the ones that are most likely to install ad blockers. So it's kind of this precipitous decline that kind of started happening. And so I ended up selling it, but I sold it for $6,000 though, so I still made a good amount of money off this. Again, unintentionally, I didn't make this website in the beginning to sell, but sometimes side projects can surprise you, especially if they're very useful to other people. You can, just by virtue of doing it alone, is like the first step. I accidentally made some money, so that was pretty cool. I touched on this at the beginning, but you can use side projects to explore new tech. One site I made to do this, I wanted to explore progressive web apps. And so I built this allowance tracker that I use with my kids, and my wife uses too, to track what the kids spend and what they make, what they spend, what they spent it on, when they spent it, all that kind of stuff. So I built this as a pure client-side progressive web app. I also wanted some experience in serverless functions. I used Google Firebase in particular for this with Google Firebase Auth. And that was quite a fun project, actually. A relatively low amount of work for a really good end result that I wanted by leveraging Google Firebase features. So it was just something I wanted to do. This is kind of both scratching my own itch and exploring a new technology. If any of you have heard of like GraphQL or something, maybe if you want to get into it, start a side project using GraphQL, if you don't have an opportunity to do that at work. To make money or start a business is another reason. There's an OKC indie hackers group, if you're not aware of it. They meet monthly here in Oklahoma City. IndieHackers.com too is a really good community for other like independent entrepreneurs who with a tech focus, hence the hackers part. So it's basically stories and interviews of people who have launched businesses. Most of them started out as side projects. Many of them with the explicit purpose of making money. So that's fine too, you know. Depends on your phase of life, I think. When I was a young teen, I really just wanted to learn. Now, if I started a side project, I'd really probably, learning's always good, but, you know, as your time gets more limited, I think money part's probably more important, gets more important, so check that out. And on Meetup, the OKC Indie Hackers group is on Meetup too, if you want to check that out, so I wanted to give them a shout. You can get a job with it. So this is an unlikely outcome, but this guy named Kurt Wilms, he created this kind of AI sentiment analysis engine for movie ratings and reviews, and Google took notice of that and wanted to hire him because of that. And so this is really kind of an acqui-hire. You might hear these typically happen with like smaller side projects that do something particularly interesting in a space. So this was in 2010, or it was acquired in 2011 or so. This is kind of before AI came. It was like a buzzword, like it is now. Everyone's talking about AI this, AI that now. But 8 years ago, it wasn't. Kind of at the forefront of everyone's mind. So a side project in particular can be a good way to stand out and get noticed, especially if it catches some popularity, if it's really useful. And this is especially applicable to people in non-tech areas, like maybe Oklahoma, traditionally non-tech. Of course, the realistic outcome is that you make a cool side project and it looks really good on a resume. And you say, hey, I might not have experience with, GraphQL or progressive web apps, or a lot, but I did do this side project with it to learn it, and you can check it out here. And that's gonna probably look pretty impressive to whoever's, hiring you or looking at your resume. So this is, of course, the much more realistic outcome rather than, getting acquired by Google. But, and then you can honestly claim you have experience with this technology. So if there's a company that's using some technology that you want to get a job at, that you are not currently using, a side project is a good way to bridge that knowledge gap to say, I don't have a lot of experience with that, but I have done this, and it shows initiative, and it shows that you do have some experience. So it's a really good thing to do. So in summary, learn by doing. Hands-on learning is the best kind. Side projects provide that hands-on learning. I would think of like an internship versus reading a book. You're going to learn a ton more by doing that internship or having hands-on learning or training. Don't wait for your employer's permission to do something. Just do it if you want to learn it, if you have that ability. Build for yourself. So work on things that you like and use. You will get stuck on hard problems, especially if you're trying to do non-trivial things. You need motivation to push through them. I think this is akin to like wanting to lose weight and say, I'm going to work out. Well, working out kind of sucks. So if you trick yourself into working out, like taking a nice scenic bike ride or, playing a game with friends instead of like saying, I got to do 100 push-ups or, whatever it is, it's going to be much more fun to do that, and it's going to maintain your motivation because you're doing something fun. So you're a lot more likely to improve by doing something fun. People are ultimately going to do what they want to do, so you might as well make it fun along the way. You don't want to build something that you hate. Community like this and the Techlahoma Slack can be a big help. I didn't have a whole lot of community when I was kind of feeling my way through this, so I feel like I spent more time spinning my wheels and made a lot more mistakes than maybe someone would normally have to today with all the knowledge and the community that's out there right now. and then have fun. So this is, I kind of ruined this slide on the other one, but yeah, this is, just have fun. Make sure it's fun, whatever you're building. I ended up having that Starcraft site for, 7-ish years in some various forms, so a lot longer than I thought. If I hated the game, that would have totally sucked. So do something you like, do something that's fun. Keep trying things. This is really key. Just keep trying things. I had a lot of failures. I still have a lot of failures, a lot of stuff that doesn't work, a lot of stuff that doesn't catch on. I kind of told you about some of the stuff that did catch on, but there's probably, 10 times as much stuff that I did that didn't catch on or go anywhere. So just because you didn't hear about that today doesn't mean that it didn't happen. So, but no matter if it succeeds or fails or not or whatever, you're still going to learn something. And if it fails one way, humans kind of hate failure, right? So you're not going to do the same thing again to fail in the same way again, right? You're going to you're going to do something a little different next time, and you're going to learn something and do a little different and do a little different. So I thought I'd share some quotes on failures that I really like. The top one: people who avoid failure also avoid success. There's this notion that and really the bottom one is one of my favorite all times. The master has failed more times than the beginner has even tried. So if you're not actively trying more stuff all the time, being open to failure as a reasonable outcome to learn from, then you're doing yourself a disservice, I would say. Or there's much more you could learn. And with these quotes, really the idea that successful people might be more successful simply because they try more things and thus fail more as well. So a successful person that you see, there's a lot of them, in the media and whatnot. Some companies you might admire, some heroes you might have. They've probably failed a lot more than they've succeeded, but you're seeing the failures, or you're seeing the successes because they're highlighted. So it's maybe not necessarily that one person succeeded and one person that failed with the same number of attempts. The successful person may have just tried a lot more. You just don't see all those failures or tries. So if you tried some stuff, maybe you haven't had a whole lot of success. I would say maybe you just haven't tried enough things. Maybe your successful thing is 5 more tries away. Maybe it's 6 more tries away. Maybe it's 22 more tries away. I don't know what it is, but you do learn something every time you try, and you're not going to fail in the same way that you did when you failed. So in the future, or you kind of take mental notes as you go, like, okay, that didn't work, so I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to do it this other way, and you kind of just naturally correct the more that you try. So anyway, that's what I wanted to share on failure, and that's all I have for you today. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I'm available on Twitter and Slack at vlucas. My website's vancelucas.com. Email vance@vancelucas. I'm happy to answer any questions or help with anything. Is there any questions here or online? Yeah.
How does Google decide when to pay for an ad?
How does Google decide when to pay you for an ad? Well, I was using Google Adsense, and you basically just include a JavaScript on your page, and it tracks impressions, it tracks clicks, it tracks all kinds of stuff. So some ads are per CPM, which is per 1,000 impressions. Some ads pay per click, so it's how many times people click on them. And then Google totals all those up at the end of the month. If you're over $100, then they'll pay out. So they kind of keep the money until it goes over $100, then they pay out. Or at least they did. I don't know if that's still true. I think so. Yeah. Yeah, so would that be the same kind of JavaScripts I would install? Are you talking about if I were to make something like the news thing today, or? Yeah, okay. So like if you've ever embedded, a comment, like discus comments or on your page, it's like a JavaScript tag or a poll or something. It's the same thing, yeah. It's the same thing. AdSense, I will say, AdSense used to be a lot more profitable than it is today, and it depends highly on your niche. So if you're making a gaming website like I made, the ad rates are just terrible. They're less than $1 per CPM, which means less than $1 per 1,000 impressions. So you can do the math really quick. I was getting about 2,000 to 3,000 unique visitors on the site in its heyday. That's like $2 a day. So $60 a month, like, it's like nothing compared to the cost. Sorry, what? They do, were they counting bounce rate and conversions and stuff? They do their own calculations on all that kind of stuff. Again, it depends on if the ad performed or not. So if someone clicked on the ad, they're going to pay you for the click, unless it was fraudulent. So if you're clicking on your own ads or something like that, then yeah. I actually got, yeah, I have a story about that, but maybe I shouldn't. I had a forum, I had a community going with that Starcraft site. And then one of my helpers who had, wanted to help out with the site went on the forum and encouraged people to click on the ads to make money for the site. And then my Google AdSense account got suspended. And so then I had to reply to Google. I'm like, no, it's not me. Please turn it back on. Like, I didn't tell people to click on ads. That was this guy, and he was mistaken. And so don't click on your own ads. Don't tell other people to click on your own ads. I didn't even know he did this until I got the email from Google saying my account was suspended, and I'm like, what the heck? So anyway, yeah, went through all that. Any other questions? All right, cool. Well, I'm around. Thanks.